If you're looking for a great way to maybe improve your life, well, Revolution Recovery Services is the way to do it. And I'm here with the founder, Dustin Straight. Good morning, Dustin.
Morning.
We love having you here because you bring a whirlwind of, one, positivity, but realism with it. And sometimes you hit on some heavy subjects, but then you offer support as people are working their way through it.
Yeah. So, founder of Revolution Recovery Services. I noticed a gap in the community. Some people may be aware that there's a pretty high level of substance use and addiction in the Valley. And there was sort of a gap for something called intensive outpatient programming, which when a lot of people think of treatment, they think of like going somewhere for 30 days. This is different than that. IOP, intensive outpatient program, is where a person can live and work and still come in and have resources at their disposal, group therapy, individual therapy, psychiatric services, all under kind of one roof. And it's a really good way to kind of figure out where you are in your sobriety journey. So if somebody doesn't necessarily have the time or the resources to go away for 30 days, cool, you can come into IOP. If things aren't really working out and we're having difficulty stabilizing the addiction, we just refer up to a higher level of care, and then when you come back after 30 days or 45 days or whatever it is, you've got that support system to reintegrate. It's not terribly difficult to stay sober in a facility where you're monitored 24 hours a day.
Right.
It's when you come home, and that's really what the idea of Revolution Recovery Services was.
When we have such a problem here, which is awful to say, but it's true because especially around this time of year, the trifecta of holidays that are coming up and people start to feel alone and kind of secluded from their regular family time and life because we're all so busy this time of year that it does make it really hard for people to stay on the wagon and stay sober or stay to a place where they're at least functioning. And we see it so frequently, and it's so tragic here in our community because we are so outdoorsy and we have all of these great resources to be in nature, but then it's important that we have these resources where people can feel like they have that support, so maybe they're not chugging a bottle of booze a day by themselves.
Yeah, and I mean, again, that's another one of the areas of focus for an IOP program is we want to educate on the disease of addiction because it's a disease of the brain. It's a manageable disease. It's not a moral bankruptcy issue. It's not a moral failing. It's not weakness. It's none of those things. So then we look at coping skills, like how do I cope on the daily? What can I do there? And how do I do relapse prevention? What are the warning signs? Because there's actually quite a few warning signs when you really educate yourself on the disease and your own personal behavior. You can kind of see a relapse coming. And then we look at, okay, what is your philosophy for your life, for yourself? Because most of us teach ourselves some sort of misinformed philosophy, like the only way I can have fun or connect to people is through drinking.
Right.
That's actually not true. When I was in active addiction, I thought that.
Right.
And then I went to treatment, I figured some things out, and I had some people help me along the way. And then I realized, oh my God, like I can do all of these things and I don't actually need drugs and alcohol to enjoy my life. And then I think another thing is, and I mean, we're in the midst of it right now, right? Shoulder season, where a lot of people struggle with connection.
Right.
A lot of people think, sobriety is just not drinking. That's actually not the case. It's the opposite of addiction is connection. So connecting to other people, and that's another benefit to IOP and getting plugged into the sober community. There's a fairly vibrant sober community here in the Valley.
Yes, there is.
It's just we don't walk around with T-shirts on that say I'm sober
or big buttons.
Yeah, we don't do that. We're just living, working, and enjoying our life here. So that's another thing that we really focus on in the intensive outpatient program is creating connection within the group dynamic, but also focusing on confidentiality. That's a big concern for most clients. It's a small town, so confidentiality is paramount, and it allows people to feel safe and do the clinical work that they need to be doing.
Which I think is really important because that feeling safe aspect is what totally changes the game for so many. Now, you spoke on coping mechanisms that you have that you could watch to see if maybe you do need some help. And so what are some of those coping mechanisms that are not the best to be using this time of year?
So as far as coping skills, right, so it's kind of 4 categories. There's triggers, right, things that activate someone with a substance use disorder to go and use, essentially, is the super basic definition. A coping skill is going to be something I deploy in the moment. So I was running late this morning, right? I was chasing my daughter around the house, and I was like, oh no, I'm going to be late. This is the worst thing that's ever going to happen. Right? So now I'm in something called catastrophizing. So I've just taken something very small, I've made it very huge. One of the things we focus on is keeping things the right size. We do that through the application of dialectical behavioral therapy. So if the opposite of the catastrophe is, it's not a big deal if I'm late at all. We want to find something in the middle. So what we're doing is we're changing the language we're using in our narration about our life. It's kind of funny, I was listening to this lecture the other day, and this guy was talking about the word abracadabra, which means as I speak, I create. It's a Hebrew word. I had no idea. And I think that there's a lot of truth there. As I speak to myself, my narration in my head, I create my reality. And so a coping skill is training and practicing on, okay, how do I speak the truth to myself, not my truth, but the truth to myself to change my reality. So the reality this morning was, if I'm late, I'll be disappointed, but it's going to be okay.
Right.
So I'm taking the temperature down. And if I can do that throughout my day, all of a sudden I have sort of a emotional regulation and a baseline that's far better for me, and it's going to reduce the likelihood of relapse. The other kind of 2 categories is we have risk factors and protective factors, right? So there's environmental risk factors. We live in a small town. There's lots of bars, there's lots of restaurants, there's lots of places where you might have used or continue to use. That would be an environmental risk factor. So what can I do what can I put in place? What protective factors can I use? So like a holiday party, right? That's the season we're into. Risk factor, the party. Protective factor, setting a time limit on what time you're going to leave. The longer you're there, the higher the likelihood of a relapse, right? So some of these things are incredibly basic, but when we kind of start there, we can begin to dig deeper and really look into someone's self-concept and what is the addiction addressing that nothing else is at this point in their life. So a lot of times we hear like, oh, addiction's terrible. Yes, it is. But for the person with the substance use disorder, what's right about the addiction for them?
Right.
Something's working for them, and how do we find that solution somewhere else?
Right. It's a distraction, or it's a numbing aspect, or it makes them feel comfortable. Like you said, it gives them that courage to be social and make connections with people. But the connections you make in that moment aren't necessarily genuine. So
no, I use the word synthetic, and there's actually theory in addiction where addiction is an attachment style. So if someone's been through some tough stuff in their lifetime, some trauma, whatever, they've experienced rejection. One thing that's really kind of, and I don't misinterpret this, one thing that's really nice about drugs and alcohol is they don't judge me, they don't reject me, they don't lie to me, they're not going to physically harm me. I mean, they will over time. So a relationship with drugs and alcohol can sometimes feel safer than relationships with people. Obviously, that's not true in the long run. You might have relationships with bad people that are those are bad. But finding healthy relationships to replace that relationship you have with the substance, that's another reason why we like connection, right? It's authentic connection, it's authentic relationship versus synthetic relationship, which we as human beings, we're aware when something's fake.
100%. Now, there's so many great portals that we could go down with all of this great information, and that's always...
I kind of nerd out, sorry.
But that's why we love having you here, because I think that it gives a perspective that not everyone will come across in their day-to-day life, and not everyone will see. So if people are interested in working with you and spending some time chatting and becoming part of this recovery group, how can they get in contact?
Super easy. I mean, the phone number's on the website. Go to the website. revolutionrs.com. There's a contact page. I usually respond to people within a couple of hours, worst case scenario, 24 hours. Because getting people in when they've kind of found the courage to reach out is really important. So I try to be as rapid as I can with response.
Dustin, thank you so much for coming in, giving us all this great information and nerding out. I love when you do it.
Thanks for having me.
Make sure that if you are starting to struggle this time of year and you know that it's going to continue into the holiday season, you get ahead of it and you find the best resource in our community, which is going to be
Revolution.
Why can't I say it? Revolution Recovery Service. And that way you can work with Dustin, who's an absolutely incredible therapist here in our community. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, we've got more of the show, so stay tuned.